The Cleveland Browns, I think, had a very interesting draft. So obviously, the big thing they did was trade for Deshaun Watson. So because of that, the earliest they picked was 68 here. And so I think what they kind of did and what their logic was of let's just draft good players. That was a clear strategy of theirs and not a bad one. I mean, I know it seems obvious, like, okay, yeah, you always want to draft good players. What I mean by that is players who were good in college. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will be the best players in the NFL because some people like to look at more tradesy guys, who are better athletes and they feel can continue to develop. But, a lot of analytics suggest sometimes it's better to do the opposite, better to go after guys who were good in college and not worry about some of the other stuff. And then there's some positions where it's kind of a mixture. So like starting off with Martin Emerson, a cornerback who, just so you know what you're looking at on the screen, this is obviously the list of players they drafted. The number to the left, that is going to be when they were drafted. And then the number right next to those players' names is going to be where they ranked on the consensus big board. Emerson, a guy who was productive, but he's a cornerback who isn't very fast on the wrong side of a 4-3, or excuse me, of a 4-5. 4-3 would be good at 4.53. So that's typically my cutoff. I like corners who are below 4.5. Doesn't mean I won't draft you if you're not below a 4.5, just that it's a lot more concerning. And for someone like Emerson, again, productive and probably could fit a zone defense well, which is what the Browns primarily do. So that's why it's interesting. And that's why I don't hate this selection necessarily. I think it's fascinating. Again, I do like fast corners. That's something I bring up because that is a great indicator of future success in the NFL is speed. But in a defense where there's two safeties deep, and we might see this more and more as more teams play two safety deep coverages, teams are less concerned about fast corners because you're not leaving him on an island. So interesting selection here. Also, Alex Wright. So Alex Wright, edge rusher, who, again, a guy who I think could be really fascinating. He's a guy who got a lot of pressure in college. His statistics are very good. So the Browns, who are an analytically inclined team, going after a couple of guys that analytics, can suggest to go after, specifically Alex Wright, because for corner and then for also receiver, which we'll talk about in just 1 second, those are a couple of positions where it just, so analytics don't really do a great job of indicating how well those positions will play. It does a good job with offensive and defensive line, but for wide receiver and, corner, those positions, not so much. So typically I like to rely on film more so there. Let's talk about David Bell. David Bell, not a fast receiver in the slightest. David Bell ran 4.65, so definitely a slow receiver. But again, he was good in college. He was productive in college. And so the question is, will the speed issue be too much of an issue at the NFL level? Hey, the Browns had some solid play with Jarvis Landry, who was another slow receiver. Maybe they feel Bell can fit that mold. But again, it is fair to be concerned about that stuff. People sometimes act like, 40 time, who cares? No, that does matter, especially if you can't break a 4.6. That tends to be, where things become an issue. But who knows? There's definitely reason to still feel optimistic about him. Meanwhile, at 108 with Perrion Winfrey, we're going to have a departure from the analytics stuff, from the just finding ways to get good players who were good in college and not worrying about traits. This is a very traitsy guy in Winfrey. He's someone who is very much a athletic type guy, 6'4", 292. So kind of a weird body type. Is he going to be an edge? Is he going to be an interior guy? Probably interior guy, but interesting there. But he can play some edge. The question is really just, will he be able to get to the point where he can really play? Because again, his athleticism kind of outweighs his production at this point. He, has a bit of, could work on some of his technique, certainly. As for Cade York here in the 4th round, listen, so you see in his consensus big board ranking, it was 286. There is a lot of debate as to how valuable a kicker is. The way that I typically look at it is the difference between having an okay kicker to an elite kicker doesn't matter that much. The difference between having an okay kicker to a bad quarterback matters, or a kicker matters a lot. So that's what you want to do, is you want to avoid the bad kicker. And if you feel as though Cade York can be that great kicker, well, then it's not the end of the world spending a 4th round pick on him at all, especially one, as you see, even though they didn't have a 1st round pick or a 2nd round pick, they still had a lot of value. Had a lot of picks in general due to trade backs and things like that, which allows you to kind of take a luxury pick on kicker if you want. I don't really have a huge issue with this. I know some people really don't like it. The main thing I don't love about drafting a kicker, though, and punter, I hate because punters, their value is basically meaningless. Kickers do have some value. The issue I really have is it seems like it's just really difficult to evaluate kickers in general. So I don't know if you actually gain that much from drafting a kicker as opposed to just signing a free agent one. So that's the main reason I don't hate it. But if you feel you can evaluate kickers, apparently he's supposed to be the best kicker in his class. And again, I don't know, but we'll see how well that works. Running back, next pick. So again, from very analytically inclined for the first, the picks they had in the top 100. After that, kind of going the other way but again, running back here is not the end of the world. They don't need a running back, obviously, but it's interesting. Jerome Ford, not someone I spent too much time evaluating, but again, seems like he's a solid player. They might have just gone best player available, and running backs do get hurt, so helps to have depth there. Who knows? He might be able to play special teams as well with a pick 156. So at 202, sixth round here, Michael Woods out of Oklahoma, who seems like he's mostly a good route runner and a possession receiver. So should be pretty interesting. Again, seems like he's a guy who's not the fastest of guys. So again, receiver here in round 6. Are you going to be a special teamer? Are you going to be someone who's going to be an every snap player? Probably not. Maybe special teams is where you belong. So should be interesting. Isaiah Thomas. No, not the basketball Isaiah Thomas or the other basketball Isaiah Thomas. The football player Isaiah Thomas, who is, edge rusher, who, again, I don't know, round 7 edge rusher could be someone who could potentially find some playing time just as rotational guys because, you tend to use a lot of different guys in the defensive line. And you look at the values, the consensus big board had him at 143. He goes at 223. So that's pretty good value. Also, Dawson Deaton, offensive lineman, 6'6", 310. So seemed like he had, from what I understand, actually was like solid in college, had some better, wins. Maybe didn't look the most impressive sometimes, but still seems like he's a prospect that I'm interested in taking. Again, 7th round. Who really cares? So yeah, that's what I think of the Browns draft. Kind of an interesting one to dive into. It's not getting a ton of headlines because, let's be honest, they drafted a lot of guys who I'm sure some people watching this video had never heard of before the draft happened. So because of that, it's definitely not going to get a ton of headlines, and you don't have the high draft picks, so no one really cares. But it's still kind of an interesting approach. And one thing I like to do is just sort of see how teams approach this stuff. And, clearly it was an effort for them to get some extra picks. They did that. So we'll see how well it works out. But yeah, the real guy I got in this draft was Deshaun Watson. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this draft? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.